Okay, Vila, I'm gonna admit everybody.
So I'm gonna switch over to my language and start recording and then I won't be able to understand anything when I switch over.
Okay.
So
okay, and we're live on YouTube now. So
and
okay,
Spanish is happening concurrently on their own channel. Okay.
Yes.
So everyone, Tim and Jen, if we can switch over to your language.
Hon, will you shut my door?
Okay, interpreters, if you could read this message if you haven't already, and then we will start our presentation. If you are in our Zoom meeting and you speak English, we ask that you please use this presentation through the YouTube Live in order to best serve our non-English speaking viewers. All links can be found on this website, which I will put into the chat now. Okay, and then Jen, you can go ahead with that.
All right, I am going to share my screen. Hopefully that will work. Are you seeing my screen now?
Yep.
Perfect. So my name is Jen Satellino, and I am a friend of Beaverton School District. I work for the College Place, Oregon, and it looks like I am really on the wrong slide. There we go. And tonight we're going to talk about paying for college. Because I'm working from home with a family with other people working from home and going to school, I am going to turn my video off because that keeps me from freezing up while I'm in these Zoom meetings, but I wanted to just pop in live and say hi to you. As you've got questions, please, if you could put them into the chat, and then at the end of tonight, I will answer them for you. So anything else I need to know, Beaverton, before we get started? All right, so then I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Jen. I am a member of the Oregon Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. I've been working in financial aid and college admissions since 1990. I actually right now have 2 children in college at the same time, so paying for college is really important to me personally right now in my pocketbook. So, and we're going to cover a bunch of information tonight, and we're going to cover a lot of information in a really short amount of time. We're going to discuss college costs, defining what financial aid is. We'll talk about the different types of financial aid applications, and I want to make sure that you know where to get help when you need it. And even though this information is really geared towards families who have a student in the class of 2021, it's never too early to start getting information about how to pay for college. And the more often you access information about paying for college, the more it'll make sense. So, but we want to be really sure that you know you'll have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of this session tonight. So I always like to start with college costs. The messaging that I get from the media is that all colleges cost $60,000 or $70,000, or that students owe $100,000 in student loans for a 4-year degree. But that's not actually the case. Those are outliers. And so they catch our attention, and that's what ends up sticking in our brains. Nationally, the average loan debt for a student with a 4-year degree is $29,200. Here in Oregon, we average about $28,600. So we're a little bit below that national student loan debt average, which is nice for us. And I have the costs on this slide to help show you that not everything you hear about college costs are true. These are actual costs from the most recent year I have data available. And these are colleges here in Oregon. Now, the community college cost assumes the student is living on their own, while the public and private college costs assume that the student is living on campus. And you can see only our private college comes close to the myth that all colleges cost $60,000 to $70,000 a year. We'll find out in a few slides, while even though the private college cost appears to be much higher than the public college costs, this isn't always the same case for each family. And I do want to point out that the public college and university costs and the community college costs on this slide are based on in-state resident tuition and fees. If you choose to go to college out of state to an out-of-state public university, then your charges will be closer to those of a private college or university. All right, colleges are required to estimate the average cost for students. This can be done by surveying students, by adding up charges, by adjusting for inflation, or even by calling around to other colleges. The cost of attendance can really vary widely from college to college, and even some components can really vary with colleges within the same city. I'm going to pick a little bit on Portland State, Portland Community College, and University of Portland. They are all colleges located in Portland, Oregon, but when we look at their personal expense budget, they vary quite a bit. At the University of Portland, they assume that for 9 months, a student will spend $972 in personal expenses. And this includes things like toiletries, shampoo, toothpaste, things that I always laugh keep my students smelling good when they're in class. So they're about $900 a month, a little bit more than, or sorry, $100 a month. For University of Portland. If we go to Portland State University, they have a budget of about $1,500 over 9 months. So you can see that that's a little bit more. And then Portland Community College has a personal budget of $1,854 for 9 months. So almost twice what the University of Portland budgets. So you can see that there's a lot of variation in the amount that colleges set when they're trying to estimate your cost of attendance. So you can also see on this slide that in addition to what are our common costs, such as tuition and fees or room and board, students can also include the cost of a study abroad program or a computer purchase if they have the permission of the financial aid office. Now remember, cost of attendance is an average across students. This means that as a student, you can choose to be below average cost-wise. Your actual expenses are going to vary based upon choices that you make. Direct costs are always paid to the college. This includes always tuition and fees, and it may include room and board if you live in a dorm. It may include books and supplies if you buy them from the college bookstore. And it may include some of your transportation expenses if you're buying a bus pass or paying to park on campus. You can make choices that will reduce your cost of attendance. Calculate what you'll really spend on things like transportation and personal expenses. Even room and board charges can be flexible depending on your eating habits. The other thing to remember is that the amount of financial aid you'll receive will reduce what you are expected to pay. Similar to purchasing a car, very few students actually pay the sticker price or that full cost of attendance for their college education. All right, each college or university must have a net price calculator on their website. The easiest way to find it is to go to each college's site and use the search function and just type in net price calculator. It's a really good idea to use the net price calculators in the fall of your senior year and check out what the results are. But before you get started, I want you to gather your most recent federal tax returns. And for most of us, that's the 2019 returns that we just filed in July. W-2s for students and parents, and any savings, investments, or other asset values. It's really important to read each question carefully, as the estimated results from a net price calculator are only as reliable as the information that you provide. I also want to bring to your attention on this slide, under optional, it mentions test scores for merit-based aid. I haven't had the opportunity yet to update this slide, but class of 2021, most of the colleges and universities in the country that students from Oregon and Beaverton, and specifically Beaverton School District, look at are not requiring test scores this year, including schools that in the past have used test scores to decide who gets a scholarship or not. So for example, at Oregon State and University of Oregon, it used to be they'd have a little chart you could look up your GPA and your test score, and they would tell you if you qualified for a merit scholarship for part or all of your tuition. This year, because of COVID, we are not requiring test scores from students. So if you see somebody asking you for a test score on a net price calculator, I don't want you to panic. They're like me and they probably just haven't had a chance to reprogram that calculator. So I just want to be really sure that I'm aware it says test scores on that slide, and yet I haven't gotten the opportunity to change that yet. So you're going to provide income and assets, and you might be asked for your GPA as well. What will happen on that net price calculator is that it will then calculate and say, if you were a student this fall at our school, based on the information that you gave us, and based on our financial aid policies and how much funding we have available, this is what we estimate your financial aid would have been this year. So it's a really handy tool to use. So now I'm going to talk about financial aid programs. I'm going to try to be really specific when I talk about what programs, which types of financial aid are based on need and which type are based on merit. So financial aid includes grants, scholarships, work study, and student loans. Grants and scholarship are considered gift aid. That's when someone gives you money to go to college and there aren't any strings attached. That's the type of financial aid that we all really hope to get. Work study and loans are considered self-help. That's when someone gives you money to go to college, and yet there's something that you have to do in return. It might be that you have to work at an on-campus job, or you might have to pay that money back after you leave school. Funds can come from a variety of sources, such as the federal or state government, from the college or from the university themselves, from community foundations, or from private donors. Any type of financial aid can be based on financial need or based on merit. Financial need is whether or not it appears that you need the funds to help pay for college, while merit is based on whether or not you fit the description of the type of student a financial aid source wants to help. And as I said, I'm going to try to be really clear when I talk about each type of financial aid, whether or not it's based on need or on merit. Whoops. There we go. So federal grants require students to be citizens or eligible non-citizens. And to receive federal grants, students must complete the free application for federal student aid, otherwise known as the FAFSA, which we'll cover shortly. Federal Pell Grants and the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, which we abbreviate to FSEOG, go to the neediest of students based upon the information they disclose on the FAFSA form. You'll receive immediate information regarding your Pell Grant eligibility when you file the FAFSA. This is easy to do because Pell Grants are portable. They follow the student and can be taken to any school that participates in the federal student aid programs. FSEOG is a little bit different. Your eligibility is tied to your financial need based on the FAFSA, which is a lot just like the Pell Grant. However, the funds aren't tied to the individual student, but instead they're tied to the college or university. Some colleges have large amounts of FSEOG and can give it out generously, and other colleges have very little FSEOG, and they aren't able to give funding to every student who qualifies. Unlike the Pell Grant, the FSEOG is not portable, and it cannot follow the student from institution to institution. So the Pell Grant and the FSEOG are both based on financial need. The next two federal grants, the TEACH grant and the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant, are not based on need, so we would call them merit-based. The Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education, or TEACH grants, are for students who plan to become teachers and who do agree to teach for a minimum of 4 years in a high-need field at an elementary or secondary school that serves low-income students. TEACH grants are usually not awarded until the junior or senior years of college because if a student fails to teach according to their agreement, this grant actually turns into a student loan that must be repaid. And we don't want to give students student loans. And so we try to keep student loans to a minimum, and we in particular don't want a student to receive a grant and then have them not meet the criteria for that grant and then have to pay that money back. Iraq and Afghanistan service grants are awarded to students whose parent or guardian served in the U.S. Armed Forces and died as a result of their military service in either Iraq or Afghanistan on or after September 11, 2001. Recipients must be ineligible to receive the Pell Grant, so they don't have any financial need, and they must be younger than 24 or were enrolled at least part-time at a college or career school at the time of their parent or guardian's death. If a student is eligible to receive an Iraq or Afghanistan service grant, there is no separate application. The Department of Defense will notify the colleges and universities that the student has listed on their FAFSA. Now, the Oregon Opportunity Grant, which we nickname OOG, is awarded to the neediest of Oregonians. Students who receive an OOG must attend an Oregon college or university based in Oregon. The Oregon Promise Award is awarded to students who will graduate from an Oregon high school with at least a 2.5 GPA. Other requirements include living in Oregon for at least a year before enrolling in a community college and beginning at an Oregon community college within 6 months of earning your high school diploma or your GED. So now the demand for funding from the Oregon Promise fluctuates year to year, as does the amount of funding available. I encourage all students who are interested in attending an Oregon community college to apply for the Oregon Promise, and that application will open up on November 1st. You need to apply, which takes about 5 minutes, and then list an Oregon college, an Oregon community college on your financial aid application form. Your Oregon Promise funds might not be finalized until after you graduate from high school. Once a student applies for the Oregon Promise, they will receive information regarding the program via the email that they use to apply. Now, institutional grants come from the colleges and universities themselves. This is why you might hear people say that a private college might be more affordable than a public college. Private schools will award a certain percentage of tuition back to students as grants. And for some of our private independent colleges, this percentage can be as high as 50%. So they'll make a significant investment in their student bodies. Institutional scholarships are often available and are usually funded by donors to the college or university. Each college or university has their own criteria and application process for their institutional grants and scholarships. So students, this is an excellent question to ask admissions representatives at a virtual college fair or a virtual visit or via email. It shows that you're interested in the college and it will get you some really valuable information. Scholarships are funds that are given to students because they meet criteria set up by the creators of the scholarship. These criteria vary according to the values of the scholarship donors and providers. We often think of grades in athletics when we think of scholarship criteria, but there are as many criteria as there are donors. For example, one of my colleagues won a scholarship from a quarter horse society because she knew a lot about horses, not because she had great grades or was a fantastic horse rider. She didn't even have access to a horse. She just loved them so much and wrote a really wonderful essay about horses. Now, I've listed sources of scholarships in my personal order of preference on this slide. You want to be the biggest fish in the smallest pond as possible. So therefore, you're always going to start with the scholarships that are specific to your high school and your community. So it might be that first you'll apply for scholarships just from your high school, and then scholarships for students that attend Beaverton School District. And then you'll branch out a little bit to scholarships for students from Washington County and then Oregon. So you're going to start small and kind of branch out, especially as you're searching. Next, I want you to be really sure that you're applying for scholarships at the colleges and universities that you're applying for admissions to. And in Oregon, you'll also want to apply through the Common Scholarship Application, which we'll get on that slide in just a few minutes. Now, lastly, there are big national scholarships that are generous and usually quite significant. They have much larger application pools, but every year we have several students from Oregon that do win some of those big scholarships that are big. They're national and they're a lot of money. So I really encourage you to apply for those if you're qualified. Now, your high school counselors are your source for local and community scholarships, but I want you to be sure that you let everyone know that you're looking for scholarships. You might have a parent or a grandparent who works for a company that offers scholarships to dependents or descendants. It never hurts to ask. You can also use the internet to help you search for scholarships. Now I'm going to talk about a specific scholarship for a few slides. Here in Oregon, we're really lucky to have the Ford Family Foundation. They're based in Roseburg, Oregon, and they have a scholarship office in Eugene. And I've been involved with them as a volunteer for over 20 years. They have a really wonderful scholarship program called the Ford Scholars Program. And every year they admit 130 new students into the Ford Scholars family. What's really unique about Ford Scholars, these are limited to students who live in Oregon or Siskiyou County in California. You need to go to college here in Oregon, but the scholarship is for up to $40,000 a year. It's really significant. So if you are a student that receives a Ford scholarship, that means that you don't really have to, I'm not going to say you don't have to worry about money because we always worry about money, but you can be really confident that money is not going to be a barrier to you completing your bachelor's degree. The other really wonderful thing about the Ford Family Foundation is that in addition to money, they're going to give you support. You'll have your own success coach. You'll have your own advisors. They have wonderful conferences where they help you develop your leadership skills. And since they've been doing this for a long time, they have a lot of alumni of the Ford scholarship programs. And those alumni always reach back out and help the students who are in the pipeline. I'm a little biased. I've been reading scholarship applications for the Ford Family Foundation for a number of years. I read scholarship applications from traditional high school students right out of high school, and also for students who are leaving a 2-year community college to finish up at a 4-year college or university. This year, you will be applying to the Ford scholarships directly on their website, which is new for them. And their website is www.tfff.org and then /Ford Scholars. The application will open on November 1st and it will close on March 1st. So this is a really Really good way to spend your Thanksgiving break or your winter break. This is an application that is really worth pursuing. All right, if you opt in when you complete your FAFSA or your ORSA, so your financial aid application, you might be offered a work-study position at your college or university. Funding for this program comes from the federal government in the form of the Federal Work-Study Program. Colleges and universities often supplement the federal funds with their own, and so some might have their own work-study program with the name of the college in it. However you get the funding from whatever program it is, work-study is a really wonderful way to gain experience, which you will then add to your resume, and that will help you with your job search after college. Sometimes I have students who are really hesitant to work during their first year in college. They're worried that if they work, they're not going to do well in school. Students who go to school full-time, but who work less than 20 hours per week, statistically have higher grade point averages than students who don't work at all that first year or any year. And I don't know if that's causation or correlation. I probably should have paid much more attention in my statistics class, but I do know that my work-study students have had better time management skills than their peers who didn't have work-study and did not work. Now, sometimes people are really surprised that I include student loans as a type of financial aid, but financial aid is money that a student receives to help pay for college expenses from any source other than their family. So student loans, while they're not anyone's favorite type of financial aid, meet our definition of financial aid. Students can borrow in their own name through the federal direct subsidized and unsubsidized loan program. There is no credit check and no need for a cosigner. For undergraduate students, eligibility ranges from $5,500 during your first year in college to $12,500 during that fourth year of college. If a loan is labeled subsidized, it means that the U.S. Department of Education pays the interest on the loan while you're in school at least half time and during a grace period or any period of deferment. So they're giving you a subsidy in the form of paying interest for you. If a loan is labeled unsubsidized, it means that the interest accrues from the moment the loan funds are dispersed. A student does not need to make loan payments while they're attending school at least half time. However, I really strongly recommend that students make the interest payments on their unsubsidized loans while they're in school. Now, parents are also eligible to borrow under the federal loan program. Parents can borrow up to that full cost of attendance for a college or university, minus the amount of any other financial aid received. Now, we don't recommend that you borrow that full amount. If you have questions about how much to borrow, you can check in with the financial aid office at your student's college or university. Now, the interest rate for your loans, when you borrow a loan, that interest rate is set for that loan until you pay it off. So if you were a freshman in college this year and you borrowed a subsidized or unsubsidized loan, your interest rate would be 2.75%. And that's going to be the interest rate for that loan until you've paid it in full. Next year, when you are a freshman in college for the 21-22 school year, then your interest rate is not going to be exactly 2.75%. It changes on July 1st of every year. So, but whatever that interest rate is, it will stick with your loan until you've paid it off. All right, there are other ways to pay for college than to just look at the financial aid programs. Many families save through the 529 College Savings Program sponsored by their state. And here in Oregon, we have the Oregon College Savings Program. Low-income families might qualify to participate in a matched savings program called an IDA, or Individual Development Account. And that's a savings program where for every dollar the student puts in, the sponsors of the program might put in $1 or $2 to match it. There's actually a matched college savings program here in Oregon for some of our private independent colleges where if a student puts in $1, the college will put in $5. And so then the student will have $6 to pay towards their education. Students can also serve their country through AmeriCorps or military service and receive education benefits in return. Some parents are able to transfer benefits, I'm going to say this slowly so I get it right, from their Chapter 33 post 9/11 GI Bill Education Assistance Program, or if the parents have served in AmeriCorps, from their AmeriCorps Education Award. So sometimes parents can transfer their benefits to their children. Students in Western states, such as Oregon, might be able to take advantage of the Western Undergraduate Exchange, or as we call it, WUI. This allows students from neighboring states to attend public colleges and universities while paying less than out-of-state tuition. It's really important to look up the rules for each participating institution and program at the website WICHE, so WICHE.edu. Not every college or university participates, and even for those colleges and universities that do participate, sometimes it's only certain programs or majors. So be really careful you're looking that up. Some students take college courses part-time and work full-time. Some college students take, part-time school, full-time work, part-time work, full-time school, part-time school, part-time work, but please don't try to do full-time school and full-time work. That's just a little bit too much to take on. The bottom line is that whatever works for you and your family is the right way for you to pay for college. Don't compare yourselves to others or your family to other families. Do what works for you in your situation. So now we're going to talk about different types of financial aid applications. So we're going to talk about the FAFSA, or the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. The FAFSA is the financial aid application used by citizens of the U.S. and eligible non-citizens to apply for federal and state financial aid. Now, an eligible citizen, or an eligible non-citizen is usually someone with an alien ID number, or what we used to call a green card back when they were green. It can also be a student who is from the Marshalls, the Confederated States of Micronesia, or Palau, which are the freely associated states. So students who are citizens or one of those eligible non-citizens will complete the FAFSA regardless of their parents' immigration status. The ORSA, or the Oregon Student Aid Application, is the financial aid application for students who are undocumented, who have DACA, or who are dreamers. We'll talk a little bit about the CSS Profile, which is limited to colleges with significant institutional money. And then we'll take a look at a couple scholarship applications other than the Ford Scholars. This is what the FAFSA application looks like online. FAFSA opens up on October 1st each year for the next school year. So this means that for the class of 2021, right now we're in October 2020, and you are going to complete your FAFSA now for next fall for the 2021-2022 school year. I can't wait till we get out of the 20s. I feel like I just keep saying 20 all the time. Now, the first time that you fill in a FAFSA, you're going to click on the Start Here button, which is located under the New to FAFSA process heading. So right in here. And you heard me right, the first time you complete a FAFSA. You are going to complete a FAFSA every year. FAFSAs are year specific. And I'm a little bit conservative. I recommend that even students who are seniors in college complete a FAFSA just in case they end up having to take an unexpected class or two before they can graduate. So if you're working towards a 4-year degree, I would encourage you to complete the FAFSA for at least 5 years. Now, an FSA ID is a username and password that allows students to sign the FAFSA electronically. and will also be used to apply for federal student loans. Dependent students should also have at least one parent apply for a separate FSA ID if that parent is eligible. All right, so you need to have 2 different email addresses in order to create 2 different FSA IDs. And you cannot create an FSA ID for somebody else. This serves as a legally binding signature. So students, you cannot make one for your parents. Parents, you cannot make one for your students. Everybody has to make their own username and password. Now, the username and password are going to stay with you for years, especially if you borrow student loans. Please don't lose it. So students, save it in your phone, wherever you save all your sensitive information. And I need you to be really careful to use your personal email, like your Gmail or your iCloud, rather than your Beaverton School District assigned email. Just in case you have to reset your email, you might need to have access to the email you used to create it. So if we're 7 years down the road and you used your Beaverton School District email, you're not going to have access to that anymore. So please use your personal email. If you've already created one and used your Beaverton School email, we can help you update that email and fix it. Now, parents, I do want you to apply for an FSA ID unless you as a parent are undocumented. Undocumented parents can't apply for an FSA ID, so we have a different process for you to sign your student's FAFSA form. Now, students, as I said, who are citizens or eligible non-citizens, complete that FAFSA form we just talked about, regardless of their parents' citizenship status. Now, students who themselves are undocumented, who are dreamers, or who are not able to fill in the FAFSA, and they're not able to receive federal financial aid. Whoops, I hit the wrong button there. But the state of Oregon supports all Oregonians who wish to complete an education after high school. So we developed a special application for students who can't complete the FAFSA. And this application is called the Oregon Student Aid Application, or ORSA. It replaces the FAFSA for Oregonians who can't complete the FAFSA, and it serves as the application for the Oregon Opportunity Grant. Just like the FAFSA, the ORSA opens up on October 1st. Now, it doesn't look quite as flashy as the FAFSA page, but it asks all of the same questions as the FAFSA. This information is processed and held by Oregon's Office of Student Access and Completion, otherwise known as OSAC, and it's not shared with the federal government or any other state agencies. You'd only apply for either a FAFSA or an ORSA. You're going to do one or the other. You will not do both forms. And again, which form you need to complete is based on the student's citizenship status. Now, the FAFSA and ORSA ask the same questions. It's really important to note that this is the student's application, not the parent's application. The majority of questions are about the student. So we ask for their demographic information, their high school name, where they plan to attend college. And then we ask them information about the income that they earned in 2019 and their assets on the day that they file the form. Now, there are questions about parents, but those questions are limited to some brief demographic information. And then we'll ask about the parent's 2019 income and their assets on the date that they file the form. And then every year we're going to bump that up. So next year, when your student is filling in a FAFSA or an ORSA in October of 2021, and they're applying for the 2022-2023 school year, we're going to ask for the income from this year, from 2020. So we're always going to be asking for 1 year of income. We're going to be asking for asset information on the date that the student files the FAFSA or the ORSA. And parents and students will both need to sign whichever form they're completing. So if it's a FAFSA or an ORSA, we've got procedures in place for you to sign that form. Now, I get a lot of questions about who is considered a parent for the purposes of the FAFSA and the ORSA. The rules for financial aid are very different than the rules for the IRS or the court system. So we ask a couple of questions. First, are the student's parents married to each other? If so, the student's parents are married to each other, the student has 2 financial aid parents and reports information about both parents on the FAFSA or the ORSA. If the student's parents aren't married, we want to know, do they live together? And if the student's parents live together, then the student has 2 financial aid parents, even if they're not married, and reports information about both parents on the FAFSA or the ORSA. If the student's parents aren't married and don't live together, what we ask in financial aid is which parent did the student live with the most in the last 12 months? So the 12 months before they file that FAFSA or ORSA. It's really important. We don't ask which parent has claimed the student on the federal income tax returns. We don't ask who the court says has custody, primary custody, joint custody of the student. It doesn't ask if there's a court agreement about who is supposed to pay for college. The question only asks which parent the student lived with the most in the past 12 months. Now that parent is considered to be the student's financial aid parent on the FAFSA and the ORSA. We're going to ignore the other parent on these 2 forms. So we figure out which parent the student lived with the most for the last 12 months. That is the financial aid parent, and that other parent is not going to be included on the forms. So we're almost done. If that financial aid parent is single, so if they're not currently married, or if they're separated, or if they're unfortunately widowed, then the student has 1 financial aid parent and reports information about that 1 parent on the FAFSA or ORSA. However, if that financial aid parent has remarried and so the student has a step parent, then the student reports information about their financial aid parent and that parent's current spouse on the financial aid form. So they have 2 financial aid parents in that case. Their parent that they live with the most in the last 12 months and the person that that parent is married to. All right, that's the hardest part of the senior year right there in 1 slide. So if you've made it through that slide, the rest of your senior year will be a lot easier. Now, we often have students in non-traditional family situations, and unfortunately, the FAFSA and ORSA seek to put all students into a very traditional box. So many students in our community are being raised by people other than a mother or a father. Unless the student was legally adopted prior to their 13th birthday, then the following people who might be raising the student will not report their information on the FAFSA or the ORSA. So this includes grandparents, foster parents, legal guardians, older siblings, aunties or uncles, or even in some cases, I've had students whose parent has passed away and their step parent continues to raise them. Unless that step parent adopted them before they turned 13, that step parent wouldn't put information on the FAFSA or ORSA. Now, depending on the individual student's situation, they might need to seek information from a parent, or they might need to get help from a high school counselor or a college financial aid officer to fill in their financial aid application accurately. So again, this is when it really pays to have a good relationship with your school counselor. All right, Oregon students will use the OSAC student portal, which you can see on the screen here, to apply for the OSAC Common Scholarship application and the Oregon Promise Grant. And you can see that foster youth can also use this application to apply for the Chafee Grant, and students who have their own children can use the portal to apply for a child care grant. And this slide has recently been updated. The OSAC scholarship application is currently used by over 600 scholarships. So you can fill in this application 1 time, and you can match it up with scholarships across the state. You only have to fill in the application 1 time. This application will open on November 1st, the scholarship application and the Oregon Promise application. And you'll want to complete those as soon as you can, but the final deadline for the scholarship application is March 1st. That Oregon Promise grant deadline is later, but it only takes about 4.5 minutes to complete the Oregon Promise. So I would just do that right as you're starting your scholarship application. It's really wonderful. We're the only state in the country that has a program like this. And it's just never going to be easier to apply for scholarships than it will be if you use this form. Now, there are about 250 or so colleges, universities, and scholarship programs that require some additional information from families in order to award their own funding. And they have a form called the CSS Profile form. You can see a picture of the front page of that form here on the screen. Now, the information collected on this form is used to award non-federal and non-state financial aid, usually funds from the college or university themselves. Just like the FAFSA and the ORSA, the profile opens on October 1st. Some schools require this just from freshman applicants, just from international students. Some schools require it from every student every year. Again, this is a really great question to ask those admissions counselors when you're meeting them, or you can go on to the profile website, which is cssprofile.collegeboard.org, and look to see if any of the colleges and universities you're applying to require this form. Here in Oregon, only Reed College requires the CSS profile. Now, the profile does have a fee associated with it. Students who qualified for SAT fee waivers, or students whose parents report less than $45,000 of income on their CSS profile application, students who are orphans or wards of the court will automatically receive fee waivers from profile. If you don't qualify for a fee waiver, but you would like one, you can ask individual colleges or universities. So if your college requires this form, you can say, hey, I'm happy to fill this in, but I need to get a fee waiver from you. You would ask the college or university themselves. So it's a little bit different from some other fee waivers that you might have to process out there. Many of the schools that use the profile data request information from the non-custodial parent, which is different than that FAFSA and ORSA definition of financial aid parent that we just went over. But they're really careful to keep the parent information separate from each other if the parents are no longer together. The profile will also ask for additional income and asset information, such as home equity, above and beyond what the FAFSA and ORSA will ask for, and they'll include that information in their calculations. So y'all, we're almost done. This is the time of year I want you to have a plan to complete your FAFSA or your ORSA, and if you need it, your profile. But what's most important this time of year is I want you to have a family financial aid discussion. Culturally, it's really difficult for us to talk about money, even within our own families. To make the college application process easier, it's important to make sure that everyone's on the same page and that there are no assumptions being made. So parents, I'm going to have you model good behavior and have you start the conversation. Have you been saving money for your child to go to college? You know, is there an amount you feel you can contribute to college costs each month? Are there any other family members who might be able to contribute to the cost of going to school? Now, students, have you been saving for college? A lot of us couldn't find work this summer due to COVID, but as you've been getting gift money, maybe for your birthday, or if you graduate and you get some funding from, happy adults in your life who want to say congratulations, are you prioritizing saving that money for college? Are you willing to make a commitment to apply for scholarships? And if you are, how realistic are your chances to receive funding? Can you find scholarships that are a good fit for who you are now and where you want to be? There are quite a few scholarships that are tied to the career path that you might take out of college. So we'd want you to look at those as well. Now, I just want to point out, these are really hard discussions. They're really personal discussions. Some parents might not be willing to borrow to send a child to college because they might need to save for retirement. And I had these discussions with my own kids, and I find this funny now, but my oldest daughter thought that I was just a spendthrift because I like to buy a certain brand of canned tomatoes when I'm making pasta. And I can kind of laugh about it now, but at the time it was really hard to hear that she felt that I was wasting money on fancy groceries. So when you're talking, give each other some grace. And if things get too emotional, agree to end the conversation for a few days and then come back to it when you're in a more gracious frame of mind with each other. Now, hopefully you'll look as happy and relaxed as the family in this picture when you're done. And as hard as this is, remember, it's much easier to have this discussion in October, kind of at the start of the senior year when we have all of the time in the world, than it is to have this discussion in late April or May at the end of the senior year when your students are trying to make a decision about what college or university to attend and you're up against a deadline. All right, I want to make sure that you have the information you need to get help when you need it. So either be prepared to do a screenshot on the computer or get out your phone and take a picture. I'm going to have some information for you on the next few slides. Now, I've mentioned before how much your high school faculty and administrators, and especially your counselors, are here to help you succeed. Use them and ask questions. You can also ask for help at colleges and universities that you're applying to attend next year, or even the college or university closest to you. We like to give you good, solid information and keep you from making mistakes, especially on your FAFSA or ORSA, no matter where you plan to attend school next year. The U.S. Department of Education has a toll-free number that's specifically to help students apply for federal financial aid. Big Future is an excellent website. I use it several times a week. Here in Oregon, we also have a site called Oregon Goes to College, which acts as a centralized place for you to get information about all things college related, including financial aid. And then lastly, the Oregon Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, so that's our professional organization. We've set up a mailbox to field your financial aid questions. So feel free to email us if you can't find an answer. It may take us a day or two to find the right person to answer your question, but we will get back to you, return your email, and make sure that your questions get answered. And that's fachat@ospaonline.org. All right. I know that this is a lot of information, so I want to make sure that I'm giving you the best information I can and that you've understood everything that we've covered quickly in this presentation. So I invite you to use a free learning platform called the ECMC Learning. You can directly access our Paying for College course at the link listed at the bottom of the slide. And as the slide says, this is a free service, so please take advantage of it. You can learn about paying for college now, and then years from now, you can learn about, when you're ready, buying a car or a house or even having children of your own. But this is a really wonderful platform, and I really want to call out that Paying for College module. Okay, this is my contact information. Again, my name is Jen Satellino. I run something called the College Place Oregon. I'm part of a national nonprofit. When we are not at home due to COVID, Portland Community College donates office space to me on their Sylvania campus, which is just the nicest thing ever. You've got on this slide my email and my phone number. So please, if you have questions, please get in touch with me. And parents, if you've sat through this presentation and you're thinking yourself of going to college, I'm here to help you as well. So think of me as I support the work that your school counselors do when it comes to helping you with college and financial aid and scholarship applications. So I'm just here to support everybody in Oregon. And then lastly, if you're a high school student, if you're a senior or if you're younger than a senior, if you want to take about a minute to fill in this form, I'll make sure that you have up-to-date and accurate information throughout the college process. The biggest advantage to filling this form in, if you fill it in right now, you're going to get a text from a robot, and that's the last robot text you will ever get. I have kids myself about your age, and I understand that students don't like to call people on the phone or email them. You really prefer to text us. And I am an old dog learning new tricks. If you sign up through this service, it means that I can text you back. So instead of thinking that you have a question and then procrastinating because you might feel like you have to email me or call me, you can just text me and I will get right back to you. So that is end of my portion of this, the formal portion of financial aid night. I am going to actually leave this slide up so you know how to get in touch with me. And then I am, whoops. You would think I had never used Zoom before, but I'm going to get back and see if there are any questions that need to be answered.
Jen, we do have some questions that came on because we're live streaming this on YouTube as well.
Right.
I have those questions for you. I don't see any questions in the chat yet in the Zoom. But I can.
But if you will read me questions, I will answer them.
Okay. Do the total cost of college, so this is back to when we were talking about the cost of college, does that represent per year or per degree cost?
That is per year. And the reason I like to break it out, one of my daughters went to PCC for 2 years. And if you asked me how much it cost her to go to PCC for 2 years, I think I would tell you maybe $4,500 a year. But if you asked the financial aid office how much it cost her to go, they would have said $18,000. And we would have both been right. I would have been thinking about like what we had to pay, what her bill was. And they were thinking about the cost of everything. So that's why I really like to put those itemized costs up there. But that is usually based on a 9-month academic year.
Next question is about the income reported on the FAFSA. If is the income being reported, is that the student's income or the parent's income?
It's both. So if the student had income in 2019, then they are going to report that income on their FAFSA or ORSA. And if the parent had income in 2019, they will report their income information on the FAFSA or ORSA.
The next question, if the student lives with guardians instead of parents, whose income is used on the application?
If the student has a legal guardian from a court in Oregon, then the student's information is actually the only information that appears on the FAFSA. So if a student has a legal guardian from a court in Oregon, then we don't have any adult information on the FAFSA, just student information. If the student has like an informal guardianship, or if it's from another state or another country, or if it's a power of attorney, then we'll need to go back and find information from at least one parent, even if they're residing, in another state or another country.
Next one, should we fill out the FAFSA even if we don't qualify for grants?
Yes, you should. I feel like I just answered this one already today. Yes, especially this first year, because for a lot of schools that offer merit scholarships, they want to make sure that they don't give you any more money than they have to. And one way to do that is to make sure that you have accepted all of the federal and state grant money that you're eligible for. And the only way to apply for that money is to fill in the FAFSA or the ORSA. All right. The other thing is that even if you don't qualify for federal or state grants, most of our colleges and universities use the information from the FAFSA or the ORSA to determine how much of their own grant and scholarship money to give to you. So I would do it at least the freshman year, have the information out there, get it out to everybody, apply for everything you possibly can. And then if you decide after doing that it just wasn't worth it, you don't have to fill it in again. But I would encourage you to do it every year.
How do you know which parent's income will be considered on the FAFSA? They have a blended family.
Okay, so if it's a blended family, it's the parent that you lived with the most in the last 12 months, and then whomever that parent is married to. So if you live the most with parent one, then it's parent one and parent one's spouse. If you're a blended family, but your parent and your step parent aren't married, then it's the parent that you live with the most. And since they're not married, it's just their income. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Heather. I'm just like,
No, that's okay.
I'm looking at you to see if it makes sense to you.
It makes sense.
Okay.
Yes. See, for how many years can a student apply for FAFSA?
A student can receive financial aid for 150% of the credits it takes to earn their degree. So for example, if you're working towards an associate degree here in Oregon, that's 90 credits. So 150% of 90 credits, so 90 credits, which is roughly 2 years, you would be eligible to receive financial aid actually for 90 plus 50%. So you could receive financial aid for up to 135 credits or 3 years towards your 2-year degree. So if you're looking at a 4-year degree, you would be eligible to receive financial aid for the equivalent of 6 years. And that's because sometimes we get into college and we change our mind or we change our major. Sometimes we start college, then we stop out, and then we start back again, and things have changed a little bit. So, but you're eligible to receive financial aid for 150% of the time it takes the average student to complete the degree.
Thank you. That made sense. And then I have one. I've already filled out or filed for FAFSA, and I already received an email from the U.S. Department of Education, and it says that it was processed successfully. My question is, what should I do next, and what does that mean?
So when they say that they've successfully processed it, that means they've sent it to all of the colleges and universities that you listed on the form. And you can list up to 10 colleges or universities on the FAFSA or the ORSA at one time. So what you need to do now is apply to the colleges and universities that you want to attend next year. The financial aid office is going to hold on to your information. And then once you get admitted, then they'll come back to you and say, oh, you've been admitted. Here's what we're going to offer you for financial aid. The other thing that you should be doing while you're waiting for that to happen is anytime the financial aid office emails you to ask you a question, you need to respond right away. So they might email you and say, hey, you said that you had 18 brothers and sisters. That seems like a lot. Are you sure you didn't mean 8? So, and then you would respond to them and say, I really meant 1, or whatever the correct answer is. They might ask for copies of your or your parents' 2019 federal income tax returns. They might ask for other random information. Whatever they ask you for, I want you to be sure that you get it to them as soon as you can. The longer it takes you to respond to them, the longer it will take them to figure out how much financial aid you're eligible for.
Is the Ford scholarship based on need or merit?
Ford is a combination of both. So Ford looks at students that have what we call an expected family contribution, or an EFC, of about 6,000, maybe 8,000 or less. And then once we've identified that the student has financial need, then Ford really emphasizes community service and leadership. So when you fill in your application, those are the types of experiences that you're going to write about and that you're going to emphasize in your application.
Is there value in applying to the Ford scholarship earlier or versus closer to the deadline?
There's no advantage to applying earlier. So I guess the one advantage would be if you forgot a piece of your application. So if you applied in January and somehow when the school sent your transcript, it got garbled, they would have time to let you know that they couldn't read your transcript or that you had forgotten to attach one of your essays, but they're not going to start reading scholarship applications as they come in. They're going to wait until the deadline and then they will start to work through those applications.
Back to the FAFSA. So how would a student update their parents' financial status if one of the parents has retired since filing taxes in 2019?
That is an excellent question, and especially with everything that happened this year with COVID. When you file the FAFSA or the ORSA, you're going to follow the directions. So you're going to give them 2019 income. Even though you know that 2019 isn't the right year for them to look at, you're going to file the form with that information. Then what you're going to do, and if you need help with this, you can text me or email me, and I'll help you write an email. You're going to email the financial aid office at all of the colleges and universities that you've sent your FAFSA information to. You're going to explain to them that 2020 is a really different year income-wise than 2019. And to use last year's income isn't a good representation of your family's ability to pay for college. That if they really want to know what your family can pay, they should be looking at 2020. That's your current financial strength. And then you'll say, here's what our 2020 income is going to look like. And can you please use this number in place of 2019?
And the next question is similar. Is what if COVID impacted the income of a family that is greatly reduced than the 2019 income?
That happened to me this year too. And like I said, I have 2 kids in college. So luckily they're both in college now. I only had to write that email twice, but it's pretty easy to cut and paste. We'll get you taken care of. Don't worry.
Can we add a college to the FAFSA after we get admission to it? So they apply to a college and are admitted, and they didn't.
Oh, they didn't list them?
Yes.
Yeah, actually adding a college to the FAFSA is really easy. You don't even need to have a parent sign off on that. So I've had students in the past that have listed colleges that mom really wanted them to attend. We've done the FAFSA, and then a couple of weeks later, they've snuck back in there and put the college that they're really fantasizing that they can attend. All you have to do is go back to the FAFSA website and log in, and there'll be some tabs up at the top, and there's a little hyperlink that says, do you want to add another school? And you can click right on that, add your school, and then send it off. And I would encourage you not to wait until you're admitted. I'd really like your college to have that FAFSA or ORSA information right now. So that also shows them that you're serious about the school. Sometimes schools award their financial aid money that comes from the school based on the date that the student applied for financial aid. So if you wait until after you're admitted, you're going to be at the end of the list instead of at the front of the list.
When is the right time to apply for FAFSA?
Anytime after October 1st. So, and you're going to do it every year. Your Beaverton school counselors are going to nag the heck out of you this year. They might even call you by name and say, hey, Tracy, I see you haven't done your FAFSA or your ORSA yet. You need to get on that. Once you're in college, no one's going to nag you. So the first time that you smell pumpkin spice, that should be a signal to you that it's fall. And when we smell pumpkin spice, we're going to file our FAFSA or our ORSA.
I like that comparison. OSAC, are the scholarships need-based or merit-based?
There are some that are need and some that are merit and some that are both. OSAC is a clearinghouse for scholarships. So for those 600 scholarships, there are 600 individual donors. And so there are 600 different ways to try to figure out which student they want to support. So what I would suggest is to just go in, you can Google OSAC scholarship catalog. It'll bring up a list and you can see, it'll tell you right on the description of each scholarship, whether or not it's need-based, whether or not you have to use it in Oregon, or if you can use it across at any college in the country. And if there's a minimum GPA, anything like that, it'll tell you right up front.
If you are identified as a 2-person support family, does both parent need their own FAFSA account?
Oh, that's a great question. Only one parent needs to have that FSA ID in order to sign the FAFSA form. If you're a FAFSA family. If you're an ORSA family, only one parent has to have a username and a password.
I have a scholarship question. I spent the first 2 years of high school abroad, so my GPA is low. How do I apply for scholarships that have a GPA requirement higher than what I have?
I would say, especially now, early in the year before the deadlines, you can contact that scholarship and explain your situation and say, hey, this is what happened. This is what the grading scheme was for my first 2 years of high school. It's really different than the United States. I would like you to just consider my grade point average since I started attending school here in the US, here in Beaverton. Some will be like, that's not a problem. We'd love to have you apply. And others might say, you know what, we're just going to stick with what we have, what our criteria are. But it doesn't hurt to ask. Just don't ask the day it's due. Ask early.
With GPA and test scores not being needed, how is merit aid based?
So colleges and scholarships will tell you that they do a holistic review. And what that means is that they are looking at the whole person, not just a GPA number or a test score number. So they will look at the classes that you took in high school. And if you took challenging classes, sometimes that's more important to us than the fact that you have a perfect GPA. We'll look at the types of activities that you did in high school, what you spent your time doing, because where you spend your time, that's really where your priorities are. So that tells us a lot about you. You will write us a couple of statements about yourself. And so you get a chance to kind of put your story forward to the college and scholarship people. We might ask for a letter of recommendation from a counselor or a teacher. And that gives us another kind of piece of the puzzle as we try to figure out who you are. I worked for 10 and a half years at Pacific Northwest College of Art. I was their admissions and financial aid director. And while I was there, for us, what was the most important was the portfolio of artwork that a student submitted, because that was what was important to their success at that particular college. So you're really just going to tell your story in a much more personal way without a test score and without a GPA than you would just looking at numbers. So it's a little bit more work for us, but it's a lot more fun. We feel like we get to know students a lot better.
How does the FAFSA tie two students together when in college at the same time?
So a couple different ways. First, on the FAFSA and the ORSA, we're going to ask how many people in your family are in college. So, and that's, we don't count the parents, unfortunately, but siblings, or, you might have a niece or a nephew that lives with you that's also in college. So we'll ask that question. And then on the FAFSA only, unfortunately, when you finish the FAFSA, if you've said that there's more than one student in college, when you get that confirmation page, it'll say, hey, you said there was another student in your family in college. Do they need to do a FAFSA? And there's a little link there. And if you click that link, it'll open up a new FAFSA, but the parent information will already be filled in. All the second student has to do is fill in their own information. And then the student and the parent will both sign it. But what we do practically in the kind of the black box of calculating financial aid, we figure out what the parents can afford to contribute. And then if there are 2 students in college, we cut that in half and assign half of that contribution to student A and half to student B. If there were 3 students, we'd cut it into thirds. So we recognize that a family just has a certain amount of financial support that they can give to higher ed in any given year. We just divide that by the number of students that are in college that year.
When asked about race, ethnicity, what percentage of that race qualifies for that race? Example, if the student is 25% Hispanic, should they choose Hispanic?
This is such a United States question. It just kind of makes me laugh. Here in the US, the only ethnic group that has to prove who they are Native Americans, or First Peoples, Native Alaskans, Native Hawaiians. Everyone else, it's self-reported. So what that means is that if you're 25% Latino, but you identify as Latino, then you would put down that you're Latino. A lot of schools are moving to, and scholarships as well, where you don't have to just check one box. You can check more than one box to indicate your ethnicity or your heritage. But it's really how you present yourself to the world is much more important than what percentage you are. Again, unless you're Native American, then we have a very rigid structure in place.
Okay. Oh, sorry, the question's moved. How much of this is applicable for trade schools?
All of it. Absolutely all of it. If you're going to a trade school and the program of study that you're looking at is less than a year in length, then there might be a couple things that change your eligibility. But for the most part, you can take your federal Pell Grant, you can take your Oregon Opportunity Grant, you can take your Oregon Promise, you can take many of your scholarships to help you pay for going into the trades or going into any other career and technical education program. So not everybody has to have a 4-year degree. Whatever works for you and the goals that you have for your life, we want to support that.
We have a question. Somebody wanted to know if you covered the Common Scholarship application.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, that was that. Let me pull it back up if I can. That was the slide with the OSAC application. Here we go. Sorry, y'all. It's Monday, right? It was this one with all the pretty little tiles on it. So this is what the Common Scholarship application looks like when you get in. That username and password. It's going to be the same for the scholarship application, which is in the tile in the upper left. And it'll be the same username and password for the Oregon Promise in the upper right. With the scholarship application, they'll ask you for your high school. They'll ask if you gave your high school permission to send a transcript. They'll ask you, at least last year, they asked you, they're not even paragraphs. It's not an essay, it's more like a little statement. You've got about a paragraph's worth of an answer. So they'll ask you a question like, tell us your educational goals and your plan to achieve those goals is one question that they ask. Then they will also ask you to fill in a chart that explains how you've been spending your time. Have you been doing things at school? Have you been doing things in the community? Have you been working? Have you been taking care of your younger siblings while your parents work? So we're going to ask you those types of questions. The application itself, it's a state website, so it can be a little bit clunky, but there's nothing on there that's rocket science. It's just sometimes really hard for us to write about ourselves and talk about ourselves. So that tends to be the most awkward part of completing that application. And I'm sorry I didn't make that more clear when I was going over the slides that that's what we were looking at.
Where should the OR 529 get captured in the FAFSA?
If the parent whose information appears on the FAFSA is the owner of the 529, then that will appear as a parent asset. There are 3 different asset questions. It'll be in that second parent asset question that asks about, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. If the parent who owns that 529 does not put their information on the FAFSA or ORSA, so say your parents are split up and you live with parent A the most, but parent B owns that 529, or grandma or an auntie or uncle, then the funds in that 529 don't show up on your FAFSA or ORSA that first year. So they will show up as untaxed income in the year that they're spent for you. So if you, but as far as like what's been saved, unless it's the parent that owns that 529, if they own it, it's going to show up as a parent asset. So if somebody else owns it, the asset itself won't show up on the FAFSA.
Do I need to reapply for parent FAFSA ID for my second child, or do I use my current FAFSA ID, the parent ID, for all my kids?
You use that same FSA ID for all of your kids and for yourself if you go back to school.
Is the Ford Foundation Scholarship limited to four-year universities?
No, you can start at a 2-year college and then transfer to a 4-year college, although Ford wants to fund students who are working towards a 4-year degree. That's an important piece of it for them. You don't have to start at a 4-year degree, or a 4-year college, but they want you to finish a 4-year degree.
On the FAFSA, do you have to claim all your children's 529 plan account or just the child who's applying?
Unfortunately, you have to put down all of them. And the logic behind that is it's a parent asset. And under the laws, the rules of the 529, you can name a new beneficiary every day. So I might have 3 kids and have, say, 3 different 529 plans, but kid number 1 gets a full scholarship and kid number 2 joins the Navy. I can take the funds that I had set aside for them and put them all into kid number 3.
Okay. Is there a cap to how many scholarships you can get?
Never, never. I want you to apply for every scholarship you qualify for. Absolutely apply. If you ever get too many, don't worry, our colleges and universities will help you with that. Sometimes they'll say, you have too much money this year. Why don't I hang on to that for you for next year? So, yeah, that is the best problem to have. And I hope that you have that problem. I hope you get too many scholarships.
If my parents did not file the 2019 taxes, what should we do? Should we try to file these taxes?
If your parents were not required to file taxes, then they don't need to. On the form, it'll say, did you have to file taxes? And you can say, yes, I filed. No, I haven't filed yet, but I'm going to file. Or you could say, I am not required to file. So if you're not required to file, then don't file your taxes. If you are required to file, and this often happens with parents who own their own business, they don't necessarily have all of the paperwork together to apply on time, and they'll get an extension. You can say, I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to. And then you can give us your best guess for the numbers on the FAFSA or the ORSA. And then once that tax return is filed, then we'll go back and we'll update those numbers so that they match what's on the tax return.
Okay. If I have 2 students that need to apply for FAFSA, both a college senior and a high school senior, how do I do both?
I would have the college senior start, because once you've done a FAFSA one time, every time that you log in for the next year, it's got a lot of the information is already there. They won't have to re-put in their name and their address and update their high school. So it's going to be a much shorter application for them. Have them go first and then fill in the parent information and then sign it. Once that college senior gets that confirmation page, there will be a link there that says, hey, you said you had a sibling in college. Does your parent and your sibling need to file the FAFSA? And if you click on that link, it'll open a brand new FAFSA with all of the parent information already completed for that younger sibling.
Could you share any online resources that could help with finding available merit-based scholarships that we could apply other than the ones offered by the private colleges or federal schools?
Yeah, so Heather, help me. Do you use Naviance or Oregon CIS?
We use Oregon CIS.
Okay, that is like the best answer ever because that's my favorite place to go. So Beaverton School District students, you have a login to Oregon CIS, which is the Oregon Career Information System. And if you have forgotten your login, you can contact your counselor tomorrow and ask for your password to be reset. When you get into, oh, they can't? Heather's like, no, Jen.
It's a single sign-on.
Oh, that is amazing. Okay, I should have gone to Beaverton schools. What was I thinking all those years ago? So what you'll do, you'll open up Oregon CIS and you want to find financial aid sort. And that's a little tile they have where you can just search financial aid sort. What that does is it allows you to put in all sorts of different criteria about scholarships, both here in Oregon and across the country. And one of the criteria is, are they based on need or are they only based on merit? So you can check that merit box, and that means that any scholarship that requires financial need won't show up on your list of results. So you'll have a nicely curated list of merit scholarships that fit you. I would also recommend going back to bigfuture.org. Get that website up here. Bigfuture.org also has a scholarship search function. And again, you can sort by whether or not it's need-based or merit-based. I would say don't pay for a scholarship search. You've got enough free tools online to do that. But when you're searching, let them know that you only want to look at merit-based scholarships, not need-based or a combination of need and merit.
The next question, do they take into account ACT even if it's not a requirement?
You know, not this year. Class of 2021, this is a hard year for you as seniors. You're not going to have a lot of fun just because we're all still at home. But the silver lining in that is that you really don't have to worry about test scores. So that's your one happy place this year. Unless you've scored like a perfect score on your SAT or your ACT, it's not going to make a difference. And even if you scored a perfect score, most of our colleges and universities have signed a pledge that test optional means optional. So even if you have a perfect score, it's not necessarily going to help you at all because they're not going to look at that when they admit you or when they're looking at scholarship recipients.
When the FAFSA is asking about a second child in college, are they taking into account a student studying abroad, such as Canada? Would a FAFSA account be needed for the student studying abroad?
Yes, they will take into account a student studying abroad in another country. And whether or not that student needs a FAFSA or not depends on the college or university they're attending. Many of the colleges in Canada will allow a student to bring their federal Pell Grant with them, and they can borrow student loans. There are some colleges that are based in Europe that the student can use all of the federal programs, not just the Pell Grant or the student loans. So when a student is looking up colleges on the FAFSA, if they put in the state code, if they put the letters FC for foreign country, it will bring up a list of all of the colleges and universities across the globe that allow the student to utilize federal financial aid from the US.
If we start from 0 now, do we have time to finish?
If you start for 0 right now.
I'm wondering if they haven't done anything.
Oh, you don't have to finish the FAFSA or the ORSA all in one sitting. So if you start right now, and then all of a sudden it's 9 o'clock and like I go to bed at 9. So if my daughter started right now, I'd be like, I've got to go to bed. It's 9:05. You can save where you are and come back to it tomorrow or next week. So yeah, I would start it when you can. It will still be there for you when you're ready to finish it. I would really encourage you to get it done, either the FAFSA or the ORSA, in the next week or so if you can. So I really love to have students complete those forms in October or the first week of November. So, but you still have time.
Can you ask to reduce the tuition if the student is staying at his parents' home?
Usually we won't reduce the amount of tuition, but the student wouldn't need to pay for the dorms. And especially at our 4-year public universities here in Oregon, it's the charges for room and board, so that dorm and cafeteria are higher than the charges for tuition. So having a student live at home and commute to either, like PCC or Portland State, for example. My oldest daughter's at Western Oregon, which is about an hour 15. That is one way to really save on the cost of college.
Do I need to claim money? So I'm filling out the FAFSA. Do I need to claim money saved to put as a down payment for a house?
So on the FAFSA, they're going to ask what you have in your savings and checking account and any cash you have on hand. Then they're going to ask about other financial assets. such as stocks, bonds, mutual funds, money markets, stocks, stock options. If you've got a chunk of money saved for a down payment and you haven't yet made that down payment on the day that you're completing the FAFSA or the ORSA, you will need to claim that funding on the FAFSA, even though you have it earmarked for something else. Just trying to think of yeah. Once you put money into a house that you're living in, we completely ignore the value of the house. So if you put a down payment on a house on Thursday and the house was yours on Friday, and then you filled in the FAFSA or ORSA on Saturday, we wouldn't see any of that down payment money on the FAFSA because it's tied up in the value of the home. That was a really messy answer to that question. The easy answer is yes. Unfortunately, you have to report it.
So is the OSAC scholarship tied to the ORSA, or is it just another scholarship program?
The OSAC scholarship program, as I mentioned, there's 600 scholarships and they all set their own rules. They just share an application form. And I would say the vast majority of them will accept a FAFSA or an ORSA if they're based on financial need. The ORSA as an application has been around since 2016. So our scholarship donors have gotten used to the idea of students applying with that application. So.
So this question is, so what if you're filling out the Oregon Promise and your GPA is lower than what you know it will be at the end of the year? What should you?
That's an excellent question. So if you're really close to that 2.5 and you're not quite there yet, fill in that Oregon Promise application. After graduation, the Oregon Promise people send an email to each high school and they say, here's a list of all of the students that applied for Oregon Promise. Can you check the box of everybody who has at least a 2.5 GPA? So, and then your school will check the box. So you don't have to have the 2.5 at the moment that you apply for the Oregon Promise. You just have to have it by the time you graduate.
I'll just add a bit. It has to be your unweighted GPA.
Yes.
Going back to the down payment question, so it brought up a question of if you could expand a little bit more on net worth.
Excellent question. So on the FAFSA, as I said, we look at savings and checking. That's question number 1. Question number 2 asks about other investments. And so these are things like stocks, bonds, stock options, mutual funds, that 529 account, real estate that the family doesn't live in. So if they rent a house out in their neighborhood, or if they have a vacation home, we don't look at the house that the family lives in. We don't look at anything that's in a federally recognized retirement account. So pensions, 401ks, SEP Simple, IRAs, KIOs, 403bs, anything retirement related is excluded from the FAFSA and the ORSA. The third asset question asks if the student or parent has a business or a farm that employs more than the equivalent of 100 full-time employees. It's getting late. If they employ fewer than 100 full-time equivalent employees and that business or farm is family held or controlled, then we ignore that. So if you've got a small business, if you've got, a small farm that's incorporated, you might own it with like your grandparent and your cousin or whatever it is. If it's family owned and controlled, then we don't look at the value of that business or farm.
Do you think a 529 is a good option for college savings given it will be included as a parent's asset?
Personally, I did use 529s. That's how I saved for both of my kids who are currently in college to go to school. Unless you are a family that has a house and you've got equity in your home and you're planning on using that equity to borrow against to pay for school, you're going to save money. And no matter where you save it, we're going to count it. So, but I always like to point out to parents, It's better to have that money saved and then spend it to send your kids to school, which is why you saved it, than to not save money and then have to borrow a loan. So I would much rather have you save money than to not save it and just say, oh, we'll have to borrow student loans. Everything that you can do to reduce the amount that you and your student have to rely on loans to pay for college is the best gift that you can give them.
We have a couple ACT questions. I'm just going to, the colleges on your applications are not requiring test scores, so you don't have to include them. Is there a fee to send FAFSA to colleges?
No, FAFSA and ORSA are absolutely free. The only form that charges a fee is that CSS profile. You're only going to fill that form in if you absolutely need to. And as I mentioned, here in Oregon, only Reed requires that form out of all of the colleges and universities that we have in our state.
On the FAFSA, do you need to include the 401k or IRA funds?
No, retirement assets are specifically excluded.
I think we're done.
And don't tell us about your diamonds or your furs or your Beanie Baby collections. Only tell us what we ask.
Can we revise the FAFSA?
Yes, if you put data into the FAFSA form and find out later that that data wasn't correct, you can go in and update it at any point. The one piece of data that you can't correct on the FAFSA is the student's social security number, because that's the identification key. So if you accidentally transpose numbers or put your sister's social security number on your FAFSA, then you would need to start all over again. But any other piece of data can be corrected. So for example, I have like 50 first cousins and I'm the oldest of all of them. And one of my cousins is a little hot-headed. He did his FAFSA all by himself. He didn't need me. And it came back and it said, you know, we can't match you in the social security database. You're not there. So he called me and he was just distraught, and he kind of gets going a little bit. And so he was convinced somehow that like his mother had kidnapped him from somewhere. He just like really, and I was just like, buddy, Junior, can I see your FAFSA? And so he shows me, and he had put his first name down as Junior. And I said, honey, that's what we call you. That's your nickname, but your real legal first name is Edward. And so once he took out Junior and put Edward in as his real name, he updated that information. We sent the FAFSA off and it came back and it matched what was in the social security database. So he was fine. But so anything like that that we need to fix, we can fix.
We have some more questions that moved. So an ACT question. If your ACT score is better than your GPA, what should you do?
Schools are, for the most part, not going to look at your ACT score unless you're applying to the Ivy Leagues, Georgetown, or a public college or university in Florida.
And if you're really concerned, work with your school counselor or work with the college admissions advisor directly.
Yeah.
How do scholarships work if you're attending an international school, such as somewhere in the UK?
It depends on the scholarship. Some scholarships will be very specific that you need to attend. Like there are scholarships on that OSAC website. The common scholarships will say you have to attend Oregon State. They're very specific. There are other scholarships. For example, there's a scholarship from Adobe. I mean, you can use that anywhere in the world. So it's just going to depend scholarship by scholarship what their rules are for where you can use it.
And I think now we have people saying thank you, and we have one last question. Okay, so we have a legal name change.
Mm-hmm.
We have just notified the Social Security office of what, or should we wait until that is updated?
Here's what I would do. And this happens quite a bit now. Whatever the name is right now in that Social Security database, put that name on the FAFSA. So that might be an old name, it might be a dead name, it might be a misspelled name, but put that on the FAFSA right now. That way it will match with the Social Security database in the 3 days it takes to process the FAFSA. Once the Social Security database has been updated, and you'll know that when you get that new Social Security card, then go back into FAFSA and update and put that new name on the FAFSA.
I think this is going to be our last question. If we have additional questions about filling out the FAFSA, whom should we contact? You can always reach out to your school counselors, and then Jen, you can.
Yeah, always reach out to your school counselors. If you've stumped them and there's a question that they just haven't heard before, they will let me know. You're also always welcome to contact me directly. And like I said, I have so many cousins, there's really not a financial aid question that you can ask me that they haven't already done it. So if you're just convinced you screwed up your financial aid completely, let me know. And I'll be like, oh, that's nothing. Let me tell you about my cousin, Ricky John. So yeah, just whomever you feel the most comfortable with, check in with your counselors. They are super smart. If there's something that they're just not familiar with, they're not going to lie to you. They're going to say, hey, let me find out. Or they'll just say, hey, why don't you call Western Oregon University and ask them that question? So, but we'll make sure that you've got the information that you need.
Okay. This will be the last one. My student has a preferred name different from the legal name. How does this affect transcript submission?
So what will happen when you complete your college admissions application? They're going to ask you for your legal name, your student's legal name. Then they're going to ask you for a preferred name. Most of the colleges here in Oregon at this point will then use only that preferred name from that point on, even to the point of that's what they will put on the diploma. You get to pick which name you're going to put on your college diploma. So we just need to have that legal name in the system to match it with the FAFSA, because the FAFSA requires that legal name. And then once you've gone through the name change, you can go back and you can change all of those documents. But we're really sensitive to that. Even I know at Portland Community College, even the class rosters that the faculty receive, I have preferred name on them. So.
Great. All right. And we got some thank yous. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. Thank you, Jen, so much for your time and your knowledge.
Of course, I love hanging out with you all. I've never done every high school in Beaverton on the same night before, so this was new to me.
We
and
haven't
I enjoyed
done
it.
it either, so I appreciate everybody's help in coordinating it.
And I really, really, really want to thank Ahmed and Hebo and we've lost a few, but we had some really, really wonderful interpreters tonight. And I know that this is really sometimes really nerdy and technical, but you all, thank you so much for your help and your service tonight. I really appreciate it.